Very interesting, that perception of the student on a journey, and actually both of you sort of indicating how far they still have to go along their journey in terms of business when they get to the end of the degree. You had a phrase there about lacking skills and stuff, which I thought would be a bit devastating, because certainly as an employer I've experienced a lot of students who've come out, especially of Oxford, Cambridge and high-level universities, who believed that they were fully formed, and fully formed meant they had to be on 40,000 within 2 years or they were leaving, and that crash of expectations. So Chris, can I ask you to comment on what you've just heard? I was looking at Stephen's list of the skills and things that people would have. And as the sort of president of Oxford Entrepreneurs, you've just finished your course. I know that you've got those skills, but you got most of them through student rag, running your own business. And we're in Oxford, half the politicians get these skills and go through thresholds at the Oxford Union. So there is an ecology around colleges which is separate from the courses. You said a little bit about that yesterday. Is that where people should be investing?
I think so. I mean, PwC is just one of many companies that forms partnerships with the student societies to help teach these skills, and the student societies wouldn't be able to do that without their help. And I think if students, particularly at Oxford, are looking for these skills, they will have to look to the societies, because many of the academics I speak to get very upset when you say you're joining a student society or a sports team. They're saying, no, you should be looking at academia. Please, we want you to be a researcher. My tutor always used to say to me, I don't want to know what you're doing, Chris. I know you're busy, but let's just talk about work. And that's the attitude that's normal. So I think it's really good that the employers are helping out, and I think apprenticeships will help out too. And I think employers getting more involved in universities are good. But from the entrepreneurship side, I've been finding it is a problem for me in this new job, because a lot of these employers are coming onto the campus and showing people how they can get a job at PwC, Ernst & Young, Goldman Sachs, etc. And many students no longer consider entrepreneurship as an option. So it's something I'm struggling with, and it's something that doesn't happen in the States.
You mean culturally it's swung against it?
It's swung against it, yeah.
It's swung against it.
And I think in the States, the universities have excellent incubators and accelerators, and Silicon Valley as well. There are private institutions doing the same thing. Yeah. And it's something I think the UK needs to try and work on if we're really going to have more entrepreneurs in this country.
But that is putting in practice what Ray Land was talking about. Exactly. People through practice finding a way to get over thresholds which are not necessarily classroom based.
Yes.
But is that with the cooperation of the academics, or is it arm's length?
It's tough really to answer that. I mean,
it's troublesome, you mean? It's
troublesome, yeah. It is troublesome, very troublesome. I mean, something that's interesting is when I came to university, uncertainty is probably the best word to describe how I felt, and how I felt in my studies as well. But then students aren't embracing this uncertainty and saying, I want to follow the most uncertain route possible and start my own business. I'm really wondering why that is.
Okay. Hilary, you come at this from a very different point of view, the Open University. Yeah. The reach and type of contact with students, but probably is there a difference in age profile? I mean, what's your reaction to?
Well, I know colleagues have mentioned, the number of under 25s. Ironically, within the Open University at the moment, we're seeing the biggest rise in under 25 students. And I think that's partly because some of the provisions are possibly not open to them because they've got caring responsibilities, etc. So we're bringing in that. In terms of employability, I could draw a contrast actually with my previous experience, which was a French business school, where we actually obtained 50% of funding through companies to put on higher level apprentice training. So the school, most French business schools get more than 50% of their funding via taxe d'apprentissage, etc. And going back to the slide that we had on the skills gap, the general French universities, the state, provide the knowledge. I'm not saying the transformational knowledge, but the French business schools provide the extra diplomas addressing the skills gaps, which students pay for as an additional requirement. Now, if I contrast that with the Open University, we're in the mass education level. As colleagues have pointed out, part-time learners has reduced dramatically over the last few years. I think for that reason you'll see the Open University has reduced dramatically its regional provision. Not so in Scotland. Our numbers in Scotland have remained stable, and that I would suggest is because we have the part-time fee waiver grant, so that people with earning capacity under 25,000 actually have free education. So our numbers have remained stable. But it's interesting, I was noting down the skills gap, and in a largely distance learning provision of mass education, when you've 3,000 students enrolled per presentation of one particular module, we need to do work on things like assertiveness training, business negotiation, interview skills. That's not yet integrated in our curriculum, because still 30% of our students are not on a qualification framework. They're taking separate individual modules. So I think that's an area of where we have to do a lot of unpicking and work to address that within the distance learning provision.
Okay, questions and comments on what we've heard here? Peter at the back.
Yeah, this is fantastic what I heard. You know, if you take an entrepreneur and you ask him to use Marcel Proust's eyes, he would probably say that speed is absolutely critical, and that the energy that he has or others have has to be preserved so that you get things done with speed without excessive waste of energy and debates without comments. And in that sense, I was wondering, how do you teach that? That, you know, we have to learn, and a lot of things we have to be trained on, as you pointed out, Stephen. But how in hell do you do that without excessive waste of energy and time?
Can I respond to that?
Right.
Speed, I think, is one of the areas we don't talk about much, but I think is, you know, we talk about uncertainty and risk and complexity, but you're right. There's a very interesting French writer, Paul Virilio, who's written a lot about speed. Virilio has always argued that people who have access to speed in any generation have access to power. So the first bankers apparently were Roman generals who had horses. You know, they could like get to the next town before anyone else knew what was, you know, being flogged. And then, you know, British, French had navies. Nowadays, interesting that the fastest thing now is information, which literally goes, well, almost at the speed of light. I'm told that companies are moving back into Wall Street because, you know, you have to be in physical proximity to the fiber optic cabling, because if you're 2 blocks away, by that point, by the time the message has got it's been sold and bought twice, that sort of thing. The other, I think, very interesting thing is people talking yesterday about, you know, 60% of people now, their phone is their main tool for accessing learning environments. If you look at Oxford colleges, you know, that is a world of slow time. Thomas Erickson wrote a nice book called The Tyranny of the Moment, the theory of slow and fast time. And it raises a very interesting issue about, you know, does higher education operate better in slow time, like these lovely closed quadrangular environments we have here for deliberation and contemplation and so on, reflection, or does it operate better in digital time, which disrupts all of that, transgresses it, you know. You can't lock out, you know, these colleges block out the outside world. You can't do that any longer. Students, I think, have not learned that from universities. You know, they've learned that from the world that they operate in. They have these universal technologies which, and they live their whole lives on. You know? So these are tools now, not just for making phone calls, but for, you know, doing everything in your life, establishing your friendship networks, playing your music, creating things, and so on. So I think the speed is with us. However, the question is, you know, do we need to claw back some area? activities require slow time. I've spoken with some students who say, Ray, you're so old-fashioned, you know, we can do all this reflection stuff and contemplation in fast time. And I think, oh, can you? You know, I mean, we're all hardwired the same way, in a sense. But there's an interesting discussion to be had there. But certainly I think entrepreneurs recognise the value of acting in fast time and speed. On the other hand, you know, the movement for slow food, you know, and I don't know if you've seen slow TV, which is wonderful that they have in Scandinavia. You know, they just put a camera on the front of a sledge going across the Arctic, you know, and the program lasts 8 hours. You know. They're going to do it with local buses in the UK.
Buses in Yorkshire, yeah. Now available in Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Okay, if you can say who you are.
Jill Shepherd, BPP Business School. I'd like to talk to 2 points. One is the whole troublesome knowledge stuff and the measurement problem. And to give you an example, I ran a course where I very much made the students uncomfortable with the concept of leadership and dealing with a messy problem and an assessment that was a wicked, messy problem. And I was unfortunately measured in terms of my ability to help these students halfway through the course, when they were uncertain, uncomfortable, hated me. And I very nearly got into a lot of trouble, but fortunately, being a relatively small business school, I said, could you just redo it at the end of the course, please? And at the end of the course, they'd come out of that uncertainty, and they had a greater resilience to deal with the type of problem that didn't have an obvious solution, which is often how they had been assessed previously. The second point I'd like to make is to Chris. I've taught both in North America and here, and it is so different in North America as to how business education copes with entrepreneurship. It's just a natural part of the way that you teach and a natural part of the way the students react to constantly be thinking of ideas and expect them to be developed and incorporated into their assessments and by the academics. And I wonder whether there is room in the levy to give money, not to big businesses, not to small and medium-sized enterprises, but to enterprises that don't yet exist. And say, actually, you deserve, if we're going to solve the productivity problem, some apprenticeship money, and you have a mentor, and you have resources and courses, and you're allowed to go through an apprenticeship system as well. Because I do think we need some more buzziness around entrepreneurship in business education.
One last comment, and then I will have to draw this session to a halt.
So I was just wondering, a question for Ray is there a study being done on the talents, the different type of talent that go through this journey?
So different type of talent?
Talents, that's right, that they go through the journey. And from the cognitive point of view, when is it the brain is really have the capability to do transformation or transition? And is it because not all people and not all talents come from same background and same society, and therefore some people are not, sometimes we're trying to fit a hole into a square, may not fit in. I'm just wondering if we are at the earliest stage, we are putting programs in place which actually can enable those talents to recognize their own capabilities, and therefore a better pathway can be switched on for them.
Yeah. If I could just respond to that. Yeah, I mean, the number of variables in learning are many in that sense, in terms of what might be preventing someone from realizing their talent. It might be cultural inhibitions, it might be their prior knowledge, which is a very important thing, and so on. There are all kinds of constraints, and Kurt Lewin used to say, you know, going forward is really just about removing those barriers. Trying to identify those, it depends very much on the discipline, it depends obviously on the confidence of learning. Like older learners very often need to be given confidence to do it. But, you know, the brain is malleable, everyone can learn at whatever stage in life. It's a question of identifying, this is what the Threshold research has done, and we have colleagues in America who look at conceptual bottlenecks. And it's a question of trying to identify what is the source of the troublesomeness. You know, is it lack of confidence? Is it their prior learning that they can't let go of? For example, every university in the UK that does computer science gets straight A students coming to do it. In all of them, about 10% of students can't do object-oriented programming. You're really bright students. Same here in Oxford, same at Imperial. Why is that? You know, and so it's a question of trying to identify where these troublesome points are. And if you can do that, identify the source and troublesomeness, that helps. But if I could just whilst I got the floor, respond to this lady's comments, because I think two hugely important things there is, yes, if the emphasis is also on these personal transformations, how do you assess that? You know, Joe Johnson talks quite rightfully about learning gain, and the TEF is going to talk about learning gain. They don't really know how you will measure, well, they don't even know what learning gain is. The Russell Group have got an interesting project at the moment trying to identify that. But if these things are so important, how are we going to measure them? You know, are you going to say, I got 68%, you know, in personal transformation? It's just kind of the wrong language. But the other thing is, the other point you made is about how you evaluate this, because, yeah, I have teachers, young teachers who we train, saying, yeah, I love all this troublesome stuff, right? That's the way I studied. But yeah, I get 2.7 in my module evaluation, and you know, Professor Smartpants next door gives them all the answers in the exam, puts it on the web, and gets 4.9 and promoted. We need to rethink how we assess these things, and we need to think how we, if troublesome knowledge is important, we need to reward students for taking those risks. You're absolutely right.
Okay, we need to take a break there now. Some instructions for people. After you've had your coffee, Stephen's seminar will be in here, and the other seminar on learning and teaching and business skills will be on the ground floor. Peter Larange, who was meant to be making a presentation yesterday, but was defeated by terrorists at Frankfurt Airport and various others getting here, we'll be doing a roundtable on what the future business school looks like. So if you're interested in going round the table with Peter, that'll be over in Brasenose, the alma mater of David Cameron, for those that you are interested in these things. And then we'll probably shorten lunch a bit, but we need to be back here at 2 o'clock. We've invited Sir Anthony Selden to come and tackle this question which has come up about the culture in the States, how the culture is created on campus, what some students bring to school and to education which may block them, what are attitudes amongst the different groups, and we'll see what he has to say about that wider disjoint, especially since so many academics have now, after the denouncement of experts, moved to the other side of the line to join businessmen, bankers and others as people who are dismissed by 18-year-olds as pa. So can you join me in thanking all our speakers, and coffee is downstairs.